The Draxians had once been the pride of the galaxy. Their civilization was powerful, wise, and peaceful. For centuries, they had worked with other species to maintain harmony and bring knowledge to every corner of space. The galaxy had respected them, trusted them, and looked to them for guidance. But all that changed in a single moment. A mysterious event occurred, one that no one could fully explain. A star system, one that had been home to several advanced species, vanished without a trace. The once thriving planets were reduced to nothing but floating debris. Rumors quickly spread, and the Draxians were blamed. Accusations came from every corner of the galaxy. They had destroyed the star system. No one could prove it, but the evidence seemed clear. The Draxians were guilty. The once proud race was cast aside, accused of an unforgivable crime. The galaxy turned its back on them. Other species who had once been their allies refused to speak to them. The Draxians' name was whispered in fear and anger across the stars. For years, they tried to explain themselves, but no one listened. The Draxians insisted that they had not been responsible for the disaster, but their words fell on deaf ears. They tried to reach out, hoping for someone to believe in them, but the galaxy was too afraid, too quick to judge. As the years passed, their situation grew worse. The Draxians' homeworld, once full of life and beauty, began to fade. Their great cities crumbled. Technology that had once been the envy of the galaxy began to fail. The Draxians could no longer maintain their once great fleet, their advanced machines, or even their power sources. They were alone. The planet's resources were dwindling, and the Draxians found themselves struggling to survive. Once a proud people, they now lived in shadows, hiding from the rest of the galaxy. They were no longer seen as wise leaders or powerful warriors. They were shunned, forgotten by all who had once known them. Their leaders, desperate to save their people, sent out a call for help. A simple message was broadcast across the galaxy, hoping against hope that someone, anyone, would answer. "We are the Draxians. We ask for aid. Our world is dying. We ask for a second chance." But no one came. The message echoed in the emptiness of space, unheard and ignored. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and still there was no response. It felt as if the Draxians had been erased from existence. The stars above their world seemed dimmer with each passing day. The once bright lights of their cities now only flickered in the darkness, symbols of a proud civilization slowly fading away. The Draxians had no choice but to prepare for their end. Their great empire was no more. They were a people abandoned, cast aside by the very galaxy they had once helped shape. Yet, even in the face of this despair, something deep within the Draxians refused to give up. They had always believed in the power of unity, in the strength that came from standing together. Even though their world was dying, they did not want their story to end like this. They knew they had done nothing wrong, and they held on to the hope that one day someone would believe them. Someone would see the truth and offer them the chance to rebuild. But as the galaxy continued to turn its back on them, that hope seemed to slip further away with each passing day. The Draxians could feel the weight of their isolation. They had once stood strong, side by side with countless other species, but now they were alone in the cold darkness of space. It was then, in the depths of their despair, that they decided to send one last message, a final cry for help, a single message broadcast into the unknown, to any who might listen. "Please, we are the Draxians. We seek your help. Our world is dying, but we still have so much to give. We ask for a chance to prove ourselves." Would anyone hear them this time? Would anyone come to their aid? They could only wait, hoping against hope that the galaxy's judgment would finally change. For months, the Draxians waited. They had sent their last message into the vastness of space, hoping someone would answer, but silence was all they received. The galaxy had turned its back on them, and they had no choice but to accept their fate. Their world was dying, their resources were drained, and their hope was slipping away with each passing day. Yet, despite everything, The Draxians continued to hold on. They had faced countless challenges throughout their long history, but this was different. This wasn't just about surviving. It was about preserving what remained of their civilization. It was about making sure their people did not disappear from the stars entirely. On a cold night, as the Draxians gathered together to share their fears and hopes, a small group of engineers worked tirelessly in one of the last remaining research facilities. The communication systems had been failing for years, but the engineers refused to give up. They had only one chance left to reach out, and they would use it. The team worked day and night, restoring what they could of the old equipment. They repaired the damaged transmission array, carefully rerouting the power to ensure that the message would reach the farthest corners of space. The engineers knew that if they didn't act soon, the system would fail for good, and they would be left with no way to contact anyone beyond their planet. After many long hours, the array was ready. The lead engineer, a Draxian named Talra, stood before the console, her fingers trembling. She looked at her team, all of them equally nervous but determined. This was their final hope. If no one responded, they would be alone forever. Talra took a deep breath and spoke into the microphone. "This is Talra of the Draxians. Our world is dying. We have no allies. We ask for help. Anyone who can hear this, please respond. We seek refuge. We seek assistance. Please, save us." The words echoed into the silent expanse of space, fading into the darkness. It was the last message, the final cry for help from a people on the brink of extinction. Talra looked up at the other engineers. Some of them were already preparing to pack up, knowing that it might be too late for a response. The Draxians had been abandoned for so long that they no longer believed anyone would come. But Talra refused to give up. She had seen her people's strength, their will to survive, and their desire to rebuild. Even if no one answered, they would continue to fight. They had to. And then, something unexpected happened. 2 days later, the communication array hummed to life again. The engineers were shocked, unable to believe their eyes as the screen flickered on. A signal. A reply. It wasn't from any of the known races of the galaxy. It wasn't from the Galactic Council or any of the powerful species that had once been their allies. Instead, the message came from an unfamiliar source, a species that the Draxians had never encountered before. The message was simple, but it was filled with hope. "This is Earth. We received your distress signal. Help is on the way." The words echoed through the communication room, and for the first time in years, the Draxians felt a glimmer of hope. Earth. They had heard of this new species, but they had never expected to be helped by them. Earth was a young member of the galactic community, still unknown to many, and not yet fully accepted by the larger powers of the galaxy. And yet, it was humanity that had answered their call. Talra's heart raced as she read the message again. Help is on the way. The words seemed almost too good to be true. For so long, the Draxians had faced rejection and isolation. To know that someone, anyone, was willing to offer help was a gift they had not dared to dream of. The engineers quickly contacted their leaders, who were equally stunned by the unexpected reply. A new hope was born among the Draxians. Someone was coming to their aid, someone who believed in them. After all the years of being shunned and ignored, the Draxians were finally going to get the help they needed. The message from Earth was brief, but it was clear. The humans had received the Draxians' distress signal and would send a fleet to their world as soon as possible. They would offer technology, medical support, and everything they could to help the Draxians rebuild their society. It wasn't just a rescue mission. It was a promise that the Draxians would not be forgotten. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the Draxians allowed themselves to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. The darkness that had surrounded them for so long seemed a little less oppressive. The weight of their isolation began to lift, if only for a moment. Talra stood by the communication console, her eyes filled with tears. She couldn't remember the last time she had felt such relief. She knew that their journey would not be easy, but for the first time in years, there was hope. And that hope came from an unexpected place: humanity. The Draxians could hardly believe it when they received the message from Earth. It had been days since they first heard the words, and still they couldn't fully grasp the meaning. Help was on the way. Someone cared. The Draxian leaders gathered in the Grand Council Hall, a place that had once been full of life and activity. Now it stood silent and empty, its great hall echoing with the voices of those who had long since left or lost hope. But today it was filled with the quiet hum of anticipation. News of the human response had spread like wildfire through their dying world, and for the first time in years, the Draxians had something to hold on to. Talra, the engineer who had sent the distress signal, stood before the council. Her eyes were bright, filled with a mix of excitement and disbelief. "We have been given a second chance," she said, her voice steady, yet full of emotion. "The humans are coming. They believe in us." The council members exchanged uncertain glances. It had been so long since the Draxians had been treated with respect by anyone. They were used to rejection, used to the cold silence of space. But the humans, this young, unknown species, had responded when no one else would. Could they really be trusted? Could they truly help the Draxians rebuild? "We must prepare," Talra continued. "We must meet them as equals, not as the broken people we have become." It wasn't easy. The Draxians had long since lost their strength, their ability to repair their once great technology, and their great cities were in ruins. But there was a new sense of purpose among them now. The humans had shown them that it was not too late, that they could still stand tall. The Draxians began working together once more, repairing what they could and readying themselves for the arrival of their unexpected saviors. Meanwhile, the humans were preparing as well. The fleet that was on its way to the Draxian homeworld was small by galactic standards, but it was powerful. Earth had not yet gained the full trust of the larger galactic races, but their technology was advanced, and their hearts were full of hope. They had seen the Draxians' message and knew they could not turn their backs. Humanity had learned the value of compassion, even when the rest of the galaxy had forgotten it. The humans had sent a team of diplomats, scientists, and medical experts aboard the fleet, along with supplies and technology that could help the Draxians stabilize their planet. They were determined to show that they were not like the others who had turned away in fear. They were different. They were human. After several days of travel, the human fleet arrived at the Draxian system. From the Draxian homeworld, the approaching ships were a sight unlike any they had seen before. The ships were sleek, shining with a soft blue light. They looked peaceful, not like the warships they had once known, but as though they were there to offer something else: hope. The Draxian leaders watched from the surface as the ships descended toward their planet. Talra was among them, her heart racing with both excitement and nervousness. She had never met anyone from Earth, but she had heard stories. The humans were known for their boldness, their drive, and their willingness to help others. But could they really be as different as they seemed? As the ships touched down on the surface, the Draxians waited, silent and still. The first humans to step onto their planet were a small group, led by a woman with short brown hair and bright eyes. She was dressed in a simple uniform, a symbol of peace and cooperation. The humans carried no weapons, only supplies and tools to help. Talra stepped forward, her heart pounding. She could hardly believe it was happening. The humans were here, standing on their world, ready to offer their help. The human leader, a diplomat named Sarah, smiled warmly as she approached the Draxians. "I'm Sarah from Earth," she said, her voice gentle but confident. "We received your message. We are here to help. Together, we will rebuild." For a moment, there was silence. The Draxians, unsure of how to respond, looked at each other. This was unlike anything they had expected. These humans, who had no reason to help, had come all the way to their dying planet to offer a hand. Finally, Talra spoke, her voice filled with emotion. "Thank you. We never thought anyone would listen. We never thought anyone would care. Sarah nodded, her eyes full of understanding. It's not just about what's happened in the past. It's about what we can do now, together. The two groups stood there, looking at each other in awe. The Draxians saw in the humans the same spark of hope they had once had, a hope that had been buried under years of rejection and fear. The humans had come, not with judgment or anger, but with compassion and understanding. As the humans began unloading their supplies and setting up their base of operations, the Draxians watched with growing wonder. It was clear that these people, these humans, were different. They didn't look at the Draxians with fear or suspicion. They saw potential. They saw the possibility of a new beginning. And for the first time in years, the Draxians allowed themselves to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could start again. For the first time in years, the Draxian homeworld was filled with movement and energy. The arrival of the humans had changed everything. Where once there had been silence and despair, now there were voices filled with purpose. The humans worked alongside the Draxians, unloading supplies, setting up temporary shelters, and repairing old systems that had long been abandoned. Taura walked through the main camp, watching in amazement as the humans moved quickly, fixing broken generators, cleaning water sources, and installing medical stations. Their technology was different from anything the Draxians had ever seen. Simple yet efficient, strong yet flexible. The humans did not waste time, and they worked without hesitation. Sarah, the human diplomat, stood nearby, overseeing everything with calm confidence. Taura approached her, still struggling to believe that this was real. "You work so fast," she said. "You didn't even ask for anything in return." Sarah smiled. "We didn't come here to take anything. We came because you needed help." She gestured toward a group of human engineers repairing an old Draxian power station. "Besides, we know what it's like to struggle. Humans have been through hard times too." Taura listened carefully. She had heard little about Earth's history, but she could see in Sarah's eyes that her people had not always had an easy journey. And yet, instead of turning away from others in need, they had chosen to help. Nearby, a group of young Draxians gathered around a human scientist who was showing them a new type of soil treatment. The Draxian land had become dry and barren over the years, but the humans had brought a way to restore it. The young ones listened with wide eyes, their minds filled with curiosity. For so long, the Draxians had believed that their knowledge and wisdom made them superior, but now they saw that they still had much to learn. Rebuilding hope. The first major task was restoring the water purification systems. The Draxians had relied on an advanced but fragile system, and when it had collapsed, many had suffered. The humans, however, had a simple yet effective method. Within days, clean water was flowing again. The Draxians, who had been struggling to survive, could finally drink without fear. Food was another issue. The planet's soil was no longer as fertile as before, and growing crops had become nearly impossible. The humans, however, had brought special nutrients and plant samples from Earth. They showed the Draxians how to create small farms using hydroponic technology. It was something the Draxians had never considered before, but it worked. Each day, as the humans shared more of their knowledge, the Draxians began to feel something they had not felt in a long time: hope. A lesson from humanity. One evening, as the sun set over the distant hills, Taura sat with Sarah outside the main camp. The sky was painted with streaks of orange and purple, a reminder that their world was still beautiful despite all it had endured. Taura looked at Sarah, her mind filled with questions. "Why did you help us?" The rest of the galaxy turned away, even those we once called friends. Sarah was silent for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "Maybe that's exactly why we helped," she said finally. "We've been outsiders before. We've been ignored, underestimated, even abandoned. We know what it's like to stand alone." She turned to Taura with a small smile. "But we also know that standing together is better." Taura thought about those words. The Draxians had spent so long feeling betrayed by the galaxy that they had begun to believe they were alone forever. But the humans had come, not because they had to, but because they chose to. Your people are different, Talra admitted. You don't follow the same rules as the others. Sarah laughed. No, we don't. That's something the rest of the galaxy is still trying to figure out about us. Talra smiled, feeling something she had not felt in years. Trust. The galaxy watches. As the days passed, news of humanity's actions began to spread. Other species in the galaxy, those who had once shunned the Draxians, were now paying attention. The Draxians were not disappearing as expected. They were rebuilding, with the help of humans. Some species were curious, others were wary. Why was Earth helping a race that had been cast out? What did they gain from it? But humanity did not care about galactic politics. They only saw a civilization in need, and that was enough for them. The Draxians, once abandoned and forgotten, were no longer alone. And as the first seeds of new life were planted in the soil of their homeworld, they knew one thing for certain. Their future had just begun. As the days turned into weeks, the Draxians found themselves adapting to the new life that was slowly growing on their planet. The once barren lands were now sprouting green again, thanks to the Earth's new farming techniques. Water flowed freely through the once dry riverbeds, and the skies seemed a little brighter. It was as if hope had returned to their world, and it had come from a place they never expected. The humans worked hard, always moving with purpose and never asking for anything in return. They never complained about the harsh conditions or the challenges they faced. They simply worked alongside the Draxians, offering their knowledge and sharing their skills. One of the human engineers, a man named James, had become particularly close to Talra. He had been working on restoring the Draxians' damaged power grid and had spent countless hours with her, teaching her new methods of energy production. The two often spoke about the future and what it might look like for their peoples. "I never thought I'd be working with an alien race," James said one evening, wiping sweat from his brow. "But here we are." Talra smiled, a small chuckle escaping her lips. "I'm sure many Draxians feel the same way about humans." "True," James said, "but I think the more we learn about each other, the more we realize we're not so different. Our struggles, our hopes, they're all the same." Talra nodded thoughtfully. She had been thinking about those very things. The Draxians had always prided themselves on their knowledge, but they had never truly understood the strength of humanity. The humans were a young species, yet they had already faced and overcome great challenges. They had learned from their past mistakes and had chosen to help rather than turn away. It was something the Draxians could admire. But even as they worked together, a quiet unease grew. While the humans were helping, the rest of the galaxy watched from afar, unsure of what to make of this unexpected alliance. The Draxians, once powerful and respected, were now rebuilding with the help of a species that had only recently begun to make a name for itself. The other species in the galaxy were beginning to question their own actions. Would the humans help the Draxians rebuild their society? And in doing so, shift the balance of power in the galaxy? Or would the alliance between the two races prove to be a fleeting moment in time, a chapter that would soon close? A visit from the Council. It wasn't long before the first visitors from the Galactic Council arrived on the Draxian world. They came in sleek ships, their arrival marked by the low hum of engines and the shimmering trails of stardust they left behind. Talra stood at the edge of the camp, watching as the ships descended, their large, imposing shapes cutting through the sky. The delegation from the Council was made up of representatives from several powerful species, and their arrival was a sign that things were changing. The Draxians had been shunned for so long, but now, for the first time in years, the galaxy seemed willing to look at them again. The question was, would they accept the help of humanity? As the Council members disembarked from their ships, they were met with a mixture of curiosity and caution. The Draxians, still wary of what might come next, stood tall but silent. The humans, however, stepped forward confidently. They had made it clear from the beginning that they were here to help, not to take control. The lead council member, a tall being with smooth green skin and eyes like glowing amber, looked down at Taura and the others. His name was Tarek, and he represented the United Worlds of the galaxy. "Draxians," he said, his voice deep and powerful, "we have come to see what has become of your world." Taura stepped forward, meeting his gaze. "Our world is healing," she said. "With the help of humanity, we are rebuilding our civilization. It may take time, but we are not the broken people you once knew." Tarek studied her carefully, as if trying to gauge her sincerity. "I see," he said slowly. "And what of your alliance with the humans? Do you believe they can truly help you?" Taura didn't hesitate. "Yes, they can help. We have already seen their generosity, their knowledge. They do not come to conquer or control. They come to share." Tarek looked at the human diplomats standing nearby, his expression unreadable. "We have heard of your efforts on behalf of the Draxians," he said, addressing Sarah. "But understand this. Your actions will not go unnoticed. The rest of the galaxy will be watching. You may find yourselves with more allies, or you may find yourselves with enemies." Sarah remained calm, her voice steady. "We didn't come here to make enemies. We came here because it was the right thing to do." Tarek nodded slowly, considering her words. "Time will tell," he said. "But be warned, there are many in the galaxy who will not accept this alliance so easily." The council members turned to leave, their ships waiting. As they lifted off and disappeared into the stars, Taura stood still, her mind racing. The galaxy was watching, and soon they would see whether humanity's kindness would change the course of history, or whether the Draxians and humans would face the consequences of their unlikely partnership. A future uncertain. As the Draxians and humans continued their work, the weight of the Council's warning lingered in the air. Taura couldn't help but wonder what would come next. The future was uncertain, and the path they were walking together was fragile. But for the first time in years, Taura allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they were on the right path. The Draxians had been given a second chance, and with humanity by their side, they had the opportunity to rebuild, to grow, and to become something more than what they had been. And perhaps in the end, the galaxy would see that the Draxians and humans were not so different after all. Weeks passed, and the bond between the Draxians and humans only grew stronger. Together, they had restored much of the planet's surface, and signs of life began to return. The Draxians' once dying cities now showed signs of rebirth, thanks to human technology and expertise. The people of both species shared knowledge, stories, and hopes for a better future. The two worlds were starting to understand each other in ways that were previously impossible. Yet, as progress moved forward, there were still whispers from the galaxy at large. There were still many who looked on with suspicion. The alliance between the Draxians and humans was not going unnoticed, and not everyone was pleased about it. Whispers in the dark. One evening, Taura sat with Sarah in a quiet part of the camp. The two were watching the sun set over the mountains, the sky painted in soft hues of pink and orange. The air was cool, and the planet's calmness seemed to match the peace that had settled between the two peoples. But beneath the surface, things were not as peaceful as they seemed. Reports had come in of unknown ships passing near Draxian space, ships that did not belong to any of the major galactic powers. Taura had a feeling that something was brewing. The galaxy had always been full of politics and power struggles. Even though the Draxians and humans were trying to move forward, others might not be so eager to let them. "I've been hearing rumors," Taura said quietly. "People are not happy with our alliance with the humans. Some think we're becoming too weak, too reliant on outsiders." Sarah looked out across the landscape, her brow furrowed. "It was always going to be like this. Not everyone is going to agree with what we're doing. But what's the alternative? We let your people disappear." She turned to face Taura. "Sometimes, doing the right thing means facing opposition." Taura nodded, but doubt still lingered. She had always believed in the strength of her people, but now they were in a delicate position. If they couldn't convince the galaxy that their partnership with humanity was a good one, they risked facing isolation once more. The following day, Talra was summoned to a meeting with the other leaders of the Draxian Council. The air was thick with tension as she entered the chamber. Several of the council members were already there, their expressions grim. "Talra, we need to talk," said Joran, an older Draxian leader. His voice was low, and his eyes were sharp. "The galaxy is watching us. We've received messages from several powerful species. They want to know why we've chosen to ally with the humans. They don't trust them, and they certainly don't trust us." Talra felt her heart sink. She had been expecting this. The galaxy was never kind to those who did not conform to its expectations. "What should we do?" Talra asked. "We can't just turn away from the humans now. They've helped us when no one else would." Joran's eyes narrowed. "We can't afford to make enemies in the galaxy. The humans may be offering help, but what do they want in return? We have no way of knowing their true intentions." One of the other leaders, a young Draxian named Kira, spoke up. "But look at what they've done. They'd brought us back from the brink. They didn't ask for anything in return. They just want to help." Joran sighed, clearly frustrated. "It doesn't matter what they want. It matters what the rest of the galaxy thinks. If we continue this alliance, we may face the consequences." There was a long silence. Talra knew the council members were right. The galaxy was a vast place, and not everyone would see this partnership as a positive thing. Some might see it as a weakness, a betrayal of the Draxian heritage. But Talra couldn't bring herself to regret their decision. The humans had proven themselves, and the Draxians were stronger because of it. "I won't apologize for what we've done," Talra said firmly, standing tall. "The humans are our allies, and we will not turn away from them, just because the galaxy doesn't like it. We owe them our future." The room fell silent, and for a moment, it seemed as if the council members were about to argue again. But then, Joran spoke. "You're right, Talra," he said, his voice softer now. "We may not have all the answers, but the humans have done more for us than anyone else. Maybe it's time we stopped worrying about what others think and started thinking about what's best for us. A new path." With those words, the council meeting ended, but Talra's mind remained troubled. She knew that their decision was not without risk. The galaxy was a complex place, and even though they had begun rebuilding, there were forces beyond their control that would not accept this alliance easily. Over the next few days, the humans and Draxians worked side by side as usual. The human engineers were setting up new energy systems, and the scientists were teaching the Draxians how to better manage their resources. The cooperation between the two species had become seamless, and the results were undeniable. But in the back of Talra's mind, the weight of the galaxy's disapproval hung heavy. Could the Draxians truly trust humanity, or were they simply buying time before something else happened? The unknown ships near their borders still lingered in her thoughts, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something that would test their partnership like never before. For now, the Draxians would continue their work, determined to rebuild their world. But as they moved forward, the uncertain future loomed ahead. The galaxy was watching, and the question remained: would humanity's help be enough to secure their place in the stars, or would they fall under the weight of old prejudices? The peaceful days on Draxia seemed to be growing longer, but in truth, the tension in the air was becoming more palpable with each passing day. Talra could feel it in her bones, as though something was coming, something beyond their control. It wasn't just the whispers of the galaxy that worried her. It was the unknown ships that continued to linger near Draxian space, quietly watching. For weeks, the Draxians and humans had worked side by side, helping each other rebuild. The Draxian cities were transforming, and the planet itself felt alive again, its ecosystems slowly coming back to life with the help of humanity's advanced technology. But that progress had not gone unnoticed. The time came sooner than expected. One morning, the sky above the camp darkened with the sudden arrival of massive ships. Large, imposing vessels that seemed to blot out the sun. The ships were not like the sleek, friendly designs of the humans. These ships were ancient, decorated with symbols from forgotten civilizations, and their sheer size made them look menacing. Taura stood at the front of the camp, staring up at the ships as they descended. She felt a chill run down her spine. The ships came from the Galactic Council's allies, the species who had once abandoned the Draxians. Now, they were back, and they were not here for a friendly visit. Sarah and James were close by, their faces tense. Sarah placed a hand on Taura's shoulder. "We've been expecting something like this," she said quietly. "But we're ready." The council ships landed, and from them emerged representatives of the galactic powers, large beings with intimidating faces, their eyes cold and calculating. They walked toward the camp without any sign of diplomacy, their presence heavy in the air. At their forefront was a tall alien with silver scales, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. His name was Kylus, and he represented the ruling species of the galaxy, the Zenthari. The Zenthari had once been the ones to cast the Draxians aside, deeming them unworthy of respect. Now it seemed they had come to make sure the Draxians, and their new human allies, were not growing too powerful. Kylus spoke first. "Draxians, you have broken the laws of the galaxy. You have allied with an outsider species, one that does not belong to our council. This cannot be allowed." Taura felt a mix of anger and fear rise in her chest. "We did what we had to do to survive. Humanity helped us when no one else would. We are not your slaves or your subjects." Kylus' eyes narrowed, and he turned to Sarah. "And you, human, you have come here, to a planet that was abandoned by the galaxy, and you dare to interfere in matters that do not concern you." Sarah stepped forward, standing tall despite the pressure from the Zenthari. "We came because it was the right thing to do. We didn't come to conquer, we came to help, and we'll stand by the Draxians, whether the galaxy likes it or not." The silence that followed was tense. Kylus and his group exchanged glances, their faces unreadable. Finally, he spoke again. "You both fail to understand. The galaxy has rules, and those rules must be followed. Your actions have consequences." The weight of his words was undeniable, and Taura felt a lump form in her throat. Could they really win this fight? Could humanity and the Draxians stand against the forces of the galaxy? The Council and its allies were powerful, and they controlled much of the known universe. But Taura knew one thing. This was her people's chance to fight for a new future, one where they were no longer alone or forgotten. "We will not back down," Taura said, her voice firm. "We have learned that there is strength in unity, and we will not let the old ways of the galaxy tear that apart." Kylus' eyes glowed with a dangerous light. "Then prepare yourselves. The galaxy will decide whether your alliance is to be tolerated." With those words, the Zenthari delegation turned and boarded their ships, disappearing into the sky. The weight of the situation hung over Taura and Sarah as they watched the ships depart. The galaxy was going to challenge them, but the Draxians and humans had made their choice, and they would not let anyone take it from them. The galactic vote. The next few days were filled with tension. Messages came from all corners of the galaxy, demanding that the Draxians and humans justify their actions. The Zenthari had called for a council meeting, and soon the fate of the alliance would be decided by the galaxy's most powerful species. The meeting took place in a massive floating arena, a place where the galaxy's leaders came to debate and make decisions. Thousands of representatives filled the stands, their eyes fixed on the center of the arena where the Draxian and human leaders stood. Kylus and his allies were ready to condemn them, but Taura and Sarah stood tall, side by side, unyielding. The trial was long and tense. The Zenthari argued that the Draxians had violated galactic law, while the humans were accused of meddling in things they didn't understand. But Taura and Sarah never wavered. They spoke of the destruction that had once faced the Draxians, and how humanity had given them a second chance. They spoke of the strength that came from standing together, and the hope that had bloomed in the ashes of the old Draxian world. Finally, after days of debate, the council made its decision. "We will not interfere with your alliance," the lead council member announced. "The Draxians and humans have shown strength, unity, and hope. Let your people continue to rebuild, and let the galaxy watch." The decision was a victory, but it was also a warning. The galaxy had seen that the Draxians and humans were not easily pushed aside. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the Draxians and humanity had forged a bond that could not be broken. As the council members left, Taura and Sarah stood together, their hearts filled with relief. The galaxy might have been watching, but they had shown the universe that kindness and unity could change the future. And for the first time in a long time, the Draxians could finally look to the stars with hope.